The Dunbar Armored Robbery. On the night of September 12, 1997, the streets of Los Angeles were quiet. Too quiet to betray the fact that history's largest cash heist on American soil was unfolding just a few miles away. The Dunbar Armored Facility, a heavily secured depot where millions in cash passed through weekly, was about to become the scene of an inside job so meticulous it would baffle investigators for years. The man behind it was Alan Pace III, an employee of Dunbar Armored and its regional safety inspector. He was trusted, methodical, and above all, invisible to suspicion. But under that clean-cut exterior, Pace was a strategist with a burning grudge. Fired just a day before the heist for tampering with security protocols, he had already spent months inside the facility mapping camera locations, security blind spots, and vault schedules. It wasn't rage that drove him. It was precision. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a blueprint come to life. Pace assembled 5 trusted childhood friends, all with clean criminal records. Together, they rehearsed their roles like stage actors. On the night of the robbery, they slipped into the facility during a late shift, masked and armed, but without a single shot fired. Pace's insider knowledge allowed them to disable the security system, ambush the guards, and load bags of cash with surgical speed. In just 30 minutes, they vanished with $18.9 million in untraceable bills. For over 2 years, there were no leads, no witnesses, no fingerprints. The FBI had little more than grainy footage and a list of former employees. But the heist began to unravel through something far less cinematic: human error. One of the accomplices, Eugene Hill, carelessly lent a friend a stack of bills still bound with Dunbar's original currency straps. That friend, after being caught spending the cash, tipped off authorities to the origin. The feds started watching Hill, who eventually cracked. He confessed and named the rest of the crew, including Pace. When the arrests came in 2001, Alan Pace was portrayed not just as a robber, but as the mastermind of a near-perfect crime. But in the courtroom, that image quickly collapsed. The prosecution had Hill's full confession, stacks of recovered bills, and the cooperation of other crew members. Pace was convicted on multiple counts of armed robbery, conspiracy, and money laundering. He received a 24-year federal prison sentence. Nearly $10 million of the stolen money was never recovered. United California Bank Heist. In March of 1972, the quiet, upscale suburb of Laguna Niguel, California, became the unlikely site of what was then the largest bank burglary in U.S. history. $30 million in cash and valuables were stolen from the United California Bank. Adjusted for inflation, that's over $172.4 million today. The brains behind the operation? Emil Dincio, a meticulous and highly skilled professional thief from Ohio, known for his precision planning and tight-knit crew made up mostly of family members. Their motive was simple: a massive, clean score. But what triggered the job was far more daring. Rumors swirled that President Nixon had stashed illegal campaign funds in a safe deposit box at the bank. Whether true or not, that potential jackpot made it irresistible. On March 24th, the crew disabled alarms, used dynamite to blast through a reinforced concrete vault, and methodically looted nearly 500 safety deposit boxes. No guards were killed. No alarms tripped. The vault was sealed tight again when they left. By the time the bank opened Monday morning, the thieves were already back in Ohio, nearly $30 million richer. But the FBI wasn't far behind. A critical mistake unraveled the crew. They had practiced the heist weeks earlier on a similar vault in Ohio, leaving behind explosive residue. That forensic link led agents straight to Dincio and his crew. Surveillance, wiretaps, and a trail of overlooked clues connected the dots across state lines. Within months, the entire team was arrested. At trial, Emil Dincio was convicted and sentenced to 20 years. The rest received varying prison terms. Only a fraction of the money was ever recovered. The Brinks Depot Robbery. It was January 17, 1950, Boston, Massachusetts. Just after 7 p.m., in the heart of the North End, a group of masked men pulled off what would be called the crime of the century. The Brinks Depot robbery wasn't just bold. It was clinically executed with military precision. In just 17 minutes, $2.7 million vanished, over $30 million today, without a single shot fired. The heist had been in the works for 2 years. Masterminded by Tony Pino, a seasoned Boston thief, the plan involved 11 men, each with a specialized role. They conducted surveillance for months, secretly duplicated keys, and memorized guard routines. Their motive was simple: strike hard, strike clean, and retire rich. But their obsessive planning was their signature weapon. On the night of the robbery, the gang stormed the depot in rubber Halloween masks and Navy-style coats. They tied up 5 employees, gagged them, and emptied the vault of cash, coins, and checks, leaving behind only $1 in coins. Not a single fingerprint. No witnesses could identify them. It was, for a time, the perfect crime. But perfection unraveled slowly. The FBI hit dead ends for years. Then, just days before the statute of limitations would expire in 1956, a former associate, Joseph Specs O'Keefe, turned informant, bitter after a falling out and a failed murder attempt by his own crew. His testimony cracked the case wide open. 7 men were eventually convicted, including Pino and O'Keefe. Sentences ranged from 20 years to life. The trial captivated the nation. Slick lawyers, underworld vendettas, and a courtroom full of secrets. Still, only a fraction of the money was ever recovered. The Brinks robbery left a lasting mark on American criminal lore. It redefined what a professional heist looked like and forced armored services across the country to rethink their security protocols. It wasn't just a robbery, it was a blueprint for organized crime in the modern era. The Loomis Fargo Vault Robbery. It happened on October 4, 1997, in Charlotte, North Carolina. Inside a highly secure Loomis Fargo and Company vault, one of the largest cash thefts in U.S. history unfolded. $17.3 million vanished in a single night. No alarms tripped. The man behind it? A soft-spoken vault supervisor named David Gaunt. Gant was a former Army vet, working long hours for modest pay. Frustrated with his life and drawn into a toxic affair with a coworker named Kelly Campbell, Gant became an easy mark. Campbell, recently fired, had connections to a petty crook named Steve Chambers. Together, they manipulated Gaunt into believing he could steal the cash, flee to Mexico, and later receive his share once things cooled down. On the night of the heist, Gaunt waited until his coworkers left, then loaded bag after bag of cash into a company van, surveillance cameras rolling. He met up with Campbell and Chambers, offloaded the money, and fled to Cozumel with just $25,000. But greed tore the plan apart. Chambers kept the bulk of the cash and began spending lavishly, buying a mansion in cash, driving flashy cars, and even depositing stacks of money at local banks. It didn't take long before red flags lit up everywhere. The FBI followed the money trail. Surveillance footage from the vault, bank reports on suspicious deposits, and wiretaps connecting the conspirators unraveled the scheme. Gaunt, still hiding in Mexico and running out of funds, was arrested in March 1998. Chambers, Campbell, and over 20 accomplices were indicted. Chambers received 11 years, Gaunt was sentenced to over 7, and Campbell got 5 years. Most of the money was recovered, but nearly $2 million was never found. Wells Fargo Vault Robbery. On September 12, 1983, in West Hartford, Connecticut, a quiet suburb became the backdrop for one of the most audacious heists in U.S. history. In the early hours of that Monday morning, $7 million in cash was stolen from a Wells Fargo armored car depot, a record-breaking robbery at the time. The operation was anything but random. It was meticulously planned by Victor Gerena, a 25-year-old security guard employed at the depot. A seemingly unremarkable worker, Gerena was secretly affiliated with Los Macheteros, a militant Puerto Rican nationalist group. Their goal was to fund an armed struggle for independence. Gerena's loyalty to the cause and personal disillusionment with the U.S. government's role in Puerto Rico made him the perfect insider. On the night of the robbery, Jarina drugged 2 fellow guards with injections of an anesthetic. Once they were unconscious, he calmly loaded over $7 million in cash into a Buick parked just outside. There were no gunshots, no alarms, no violence, just cold precision. By the time the depot's security system alerted authorities, Jarina had vanished. The FBI launched a massive manhunt, naming Jarina to its 10 most wanted list, but leads dried up fast. It wasn't until years later that the robbery was linked to Los Macheteros, when federal investigators uncovered a wider plot involving money laundering, safe houses, and encrypted communications. Despite multiple arrests within the group, Jarina himself was never found. In 1989, 19 members of Los Macheteros were indicted on conspiracy and racketeering charges. Though many of the legal proceedings drew criticism for their political overtones, some charges were dropped due to concerns over prosecutorial overreach and civil liberties violations. Jarina, meanwhile, remained a ghost, his whereabouts unknown. Today, the case stands as a rare example of ideological crime executed with military precision, and of a fugitive who, 4 decades later, is still free. See first bank robbery. In the fall of 1992, Lakewood, Washington became the stage for one of the most cinematic bank robberies in U.S. history. The target was See First Bank. The amount stolen was $2.5 million, and the man behind it was Scott Scurlock, a charismatic, genius-level chemist with a taste for danger, a flair for disguise, and a double life that would end in blood. He was famously known as the Hollywood Bandit. Scurlock wasn't your typical criminal. A former medical student at Evergreen State College, he was brilliant, persuasive, and lived in a custom-built treehouse near Olympia. But by the late 80s, he'd abandoned medicine for meth manufacturing and then escalated into armed robbery. His motive? Thrill, freedom, and fast cash to sustain a luxurious, off-the-grid life. By 1992, Scurlock had already pulled off several successful heists with the help of 2 trusted partners, Steve Myers and Mark Biggins. For the See First job, they used Hollywood-level prosthetics to obscure their identities, entered the bank just after closing, and held employees at gunpoint while forcing them to open the vault. No one was killed, but the precision was terrifying. In under 30 minutes, they escaped with $2.5 million. For years, they stayed ahead of the law. Scurlock never spent large amounts. He buried cash in PVC pipes, used aliases, and lived like a ghost. But by 1996, the FBI had begun closing in, piecing together his patterns across 17 robberies totaling over $2 million. The end came on November 27, 1996, after a failed robbery in Seattle turned into a high-speed chase. As Myers and Biggins were captured, Scurlock fled into the darkness. Cornered in an RV hours later, he took his own life with a single gunshot. In court, Myers and Biggins testified about the robberies and were sentenced to 21 and 22 years, respectively. Scurlock, enigmatic, brilliant, and fatally flawed, left behind a legend that still haunts law enforcement to this day. The See First robbery wasn't just a theft. It was a performance crafted by a man who blurred the line between outlaw and illusionist. And even in death, the Hollywood Bandit remains one of America's most captivating criminal masterminds. First National Bank of Arizona robbery. In Tucson, Arizona, on April 22, 1981, 4 masked gunmen in Halloween masks struck the First National Bank of Arizona, walking away with $3.3 million in cash, then the largest bank robbery in U.S. history. A heist that stunned the Southwest and left investigators racing to uncover the identities behind the masks. Their motive was pure, calculated ambition. Arizona locals or transplants, little is known of their personal lives, but one name would emerge: David Lee Grandstaff, a mastermind figure in that notorious Tucson crew, later dubbed the Boys. Interviews and later reporting would reveal Grandstaff's intelligence, criminal history dating back to adolescence in Des Moines, and his singular focus on high-stakes bank jobs. In the early afternoon, they entered wearing conspicuous Halloween masks, armed, imposing, yet no civilians were killed. Their mode of operation was force and fear, not slaughter. Within minutes, they seized control, subdued employees, and accessed the vault. No silent alarms, no subtlety. They exited swiftly, disappearing into the desert heat with duffel bags heavy with cash, $3.3 million in small bills. Initial investigation relied heavily on FBI profiling. An inside job was considered, but no insiders were ever charged. Instead, local law enforcement and FBI agents pursued bank surveillance, witness testimonies, and banknote tracking. The narrative shifted when David Grandstaff's post-heist activities aroused suspicion. His lavish spending and certain associations brought him under scrutiny in later investigations tied to other Arizona heists. Grandstaff, along with 2 accomplices, eventually faced trial, not for this heist alone, but for a series of major bank robberies across Arizona. The court proceedings in the early 1990s were dramatic. The jury was unable to convict the boys for the Tucson job due to insufficient direct evidence tying them to the getaway, despite belief in their guilt. Ultimately, Grandstaff served time for other criminal charges and later re-emerged publicly as a painting contractor in Des Moines. The Sentry Armored Courier Robbery. On the night of December 12, 1982, in the Bronx, New York, the Sentry Armored Courier facility became the stage for one of the most astounding crimes in U.S. history, a meticulously planned theft of over $11 million in cash. The heist was masterminded by an organized group that included an inside man security guard, Christos Potamidis, and skilled accomplices like Nicholas Gregory, accused of bypassing alarms. Motivations remain murky. Less ideological, more greed-fueled, according to prosecutors, driven by financial gain and audacious ambition. In the pre-dawn hours, the robbers penetrated the roof with crowbars and wire cutters, lowered themselves inside, and neutralized the lone guard, Potamidis, who later claimed masked gunmen overpowered him. With alarm systems expertly disabled, they loaded cash, primarily in $50 and $100 bills, into a getaway vehicle. The raid lasted hours, and though no murders occurred, traces included a mocking "robbers were here" scrawled on a dusty mirror. Authorities later estimated $5.3 million to $11 million disappeared. Only about $1 million was ever recovered. A joint FBI and Bronx detective task force quickly formed. Breakthroughs came from following financial leads. Potamidis was arrested in San Juan, Puerto Rico in early 1983, and Gregory was caught in September 1984 during a DUI stop, despite using dyed blonde hair and a false identity. Evidence from a Queens apartment linked them to blueprints, weapons, and stolen cash. At the 1983 trial, 3 accomplices, Potamidis, Eddie Argitakos, labeled the heist's mastermind, and his cousin, were convicted and sentenced up to 15 years. Gregory, held on $10 million bail, faced trial later. Judge Edward Weinfeld described the robbery as coolly planned and a crime of greed, lamenting that most stolen funds vanished. The Sentry heist was, at that moment, the largest cash robbery in U.S. history, and remains notorious for its scale, sophistication, and the mystery surrounding the missing millions. It closed Sentry's doors and deepened scrutiny on armored transport security. Inspired works include the 2013 film Empire State, which dramatizes the real-life events. This chronicle captures the cold precision of the crime, the long reach of justice, and the astonishing fact that most of the money remains unaccounted for, echoing through the Bronx more than 40 years later. The Loomis Fargo Robbery, Florida. On March 29, 1997, Jacksonville, Florida, became the backdrop for one of the boldest inside jobs in U.S. armored truck history. It was a Saturday morning when Loomis Fargo Vault Supervisor Philip Noel Johnson vanished, along with an armored truck carrying $18.8 million in cash. Johnson was a trusted employee, but beneath the uniform, he harbored resentment over low pay and a craving for luxury. Over months, he quietly crafted a plan, memorizing security protocols, identifying blind spots, and learning the schedule inside out. His motive? simple greed wrapped in perceived injustice. That morning, Johnson left the depot with two co-workers under the guise of a standard cash delivery. He pulled into a remote parking lot, drew a gun, and handcuffed both men, locking them in the truck's rear. Then he drove off with the cash, ditched the truck near a storage facility, and caught a flight to Mexico with fake documents and a suitcase full of money. No one was hurt, but nearly $19 million was gone without a trace. The investigation stalled for 2 months until a crucial break. Johnson had returned to the U.S. through border crossings in Texas and California. A routine customs check flagged him in San Diego on May 22, 1997. Inside his rental car, nearly $300,000 in cash. The FBI later uncovered over $16 million hidden in a North Carolina storage unit rented under a fake name. In 1999, Johnson pleaded guilty to robbery and money laundering. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Most of the stolen money was recovered, but not all. Nearly $2 million remains missing to this day. The Jacksonville Loomis heist stands as one of the largest armored car thefts in American history, executed without violence, foiled by arrogance. Thank you very much for watching this video. And if you enjoyed the stories, make sure to like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel to see more interesting videos coming up.